This is the Moto G4, Motorola's 4th generation budget handset. Does the camera on this device have everything you need for your everyday picture taking needs? Well, that's why we're creating this video right here. I'm Nick Ackerman. Let's find out what this Moto G4 has to offer right here in this video. Let's go. So let's kick this off with a hardware tour. On the rear of the device, you're going to find yourself a 13 megapixel f2.0 aperture camera with a dual tone LED flash. Now this does shoot in at 1080p at 30 FPS frames per second, and this is the 13 megapixel. This is not the plus model, so that one has a 16. Going to the front of the device, you're going to find yourself a f2.2 5 megapixel camera here that also shoots in at 1080p with no front facing flash. You do have a software flash for nighttime selfies, however. Now let's kick it into the lock screen, and if you notice, if we go to lock screen, there's no home button here on the Moto G4, so you do have to swipe from the right as standard Android stuff, and pretty much iPhone does that as well. Now if you wanted a quick shortcut for this type of camera action, Motorola doesn't have a double click button, but you can do a quick wrist capture by going into the Motorola actions here. So if we go into actions for this gesture shortcuts, we can go to twist to quick capture, which is going to give you a little wrist flick, which is going to allow you to get right into your camera. And this works across the board no matter what software you're in. If you just give it a quick wrist flick, you are going to be able to snap off pictures with pretty much ease here. Now I did try to put it in the front facing mode, and when I did it, it goes back to the rear. So it might just go back to the rear. There may be a setting, but I didn't find one here for that. Now diving closer into the camera software, let's just get a good look at everything that has to offer. So you do have your shutter button right here, but above that you do have the option to go into separate modes here, and one of those being the manual mode, which I'm going to click here and show you what is to offer. So you do have spot metering if you're you know how to mess with gradients and spot metering. That's more professional camera stuff. You do have white balancing here, and you do have the ability to autofocus and ISOs as well as exposure. And this little arrow down here makes it kind of look like the older Lumias, and I really dig this manual control system that Motorola has put here on the G4. So it's pretty decent. So also we do have the slow motion ability here, but it's not the greatest in the world, I found, and it's not even as good as something like the iPhone 5S's slow motion. It shoots in 540p, which we will show later. You also have panorama and video as well as photo here. Now going up to the top, you can see we do have a timer on the Moto G4 up to 3 seconds and 10 seconds, which is very handy if you're taking selfies on a tripod or something. And we do have auto focusing HDR, and you can turn that on, and the torch as well. Also, you can lift the exposure really easily here on that little slider there. Now going to the front facing camera, you can see we do have a similar feature here. We do, hello, how are you? And we do have autofocus on and off. And yeah, that's pretty much the front facing camera. You can mess with the features on the front as well here. Furthermore, a quick swipe from the right is going to reveal some more features to you. The ability to turn off shutter sound, phone storage, and if you insert an SD card, you could switch the storage location. Quick capture is what we talked about earlier, as well as save location, photo sizing, and we do have 16:9 that shoots in 9.7 megapixels. So that's going to be your wide angle right there. We do have the 8 megapixel 4:3, which is basically what the older iPhones offered. And you do have the ability to shoot in 1080, 720, and 480p at 30 frames per second. Going down, you can see that slow motion we talked about earlier at 540p, so that's quarter HD, that's not quad HD for all of you guys out there wondering. And if we pull off the back of the Moto G4, you can see your slot is going to be located right here, and that's where you can span up to 128 gigabytes of extra storage, which is a really nice touch for this price range of a phone. So what I want to do here is just basically take a few quick snaps here just to see how fast this camera shoots, and we're going to fire off real quickly. You can see it does shoot pretty quick. Not the quickest I've seen, but it does have a burst mode, and once again, this burst mode is not the quickest, but it does fire fast enough, and I think it fires fast enough to where you're not going to miss your moment. And you do have the ability to record here pretty smoothly. It's a pretty stable camera here. It doesn't take the best video I've seen, but it does have pretty stable recording. Now it does have the ability to shoot while you're recording as well as pause, and you can turn on the torch if you want to do some nighttime recording on the Moto G4. So it's pretty fully featured featured here. Going off to the front recording, you also have ability to shoot on the front recording as well as pause. No torch here because there is no external hardware for that feature. Now, going into the software, I do want to talk about the gallery. There is no, third-party gallery or Motorola gallery. You do use the Google Photo apps, which is not a bad thing, but beware that these photos are not connected to Wi-Fi, then they are not going to sync up to Google Photos. So you want to keep this connected to Wi-Fi if you want to store in the cloud, although you still would be able to view them. As you can see, I'm viewing them in airplane mode. But what I did is I went and installed an application called QuickPic because I do tend to like, third-party applications for photos, but that's just me. You may differ. Now, the ergonomics of the device, I found them to be really well for, shooting because of the curved nature and the grippy back. Makes it really easy to hold this Moto G4 in your hand while you are shooting pictures. You can see how it wraps around the hand here. Now, it's going to wrap around everyone's hands nicely, but a little bit better around mine. Unless you have big hands, it'll wrap good around yours as well. Now, that's pretty much going to wrap it up in terms of the software and ergonomics and all of what we need to know about the G4. Now, let's just take a look at some of the examples. Be sure to click this like button for me if you enjoyed this video to show your support, and I will catch you on the other side of this video, and peace. So let's begin with this, 4x3 9.7 megapixel iPad Pro. You can see this is an indoor macro shot with good lighting, so it wasn't that bad. Now here on this keyboard, this is also 4x3 in the same location, good lighting, and you can see quite a bit of detail on this indoor macro. I switched it over to the 9.7 16x9 here, and you can see it lost a little bit of detail as it's not quite the highest resolution. This is also a macro here on the handicap sign, and this is with the HDR turned on. Switching it over to this sign right here, this is 4x3, 13 megapixels, and now 16 megapixels. Looks pretty decent. I took it outside a bit, and you could see this is 16 by 9, 9.7, and it still picked up quite a bit of good detail on this widescreen shot. Now this was with the HDR turned on, and there was a slight increase in exposure, and you could see the high dynamic range turned out pretty decently here. Now on this shot right here, this is a 4x3 aspect ratio, and I thought this pulled in the best detail on the flowers. Now I got a little bit closer in on the flower, and you can see here this is that 16 by 9 9.7, and there's quite a bit of detail here, and this picture turned out well. But when I turned on the 13 megapixel, I did see a little bit of an increase in quality, but where I really seen a change was when I turned on high dynamic range here. You could see there was a little bit of overexposure when I turned that on, and I wasn't very pleased with this photo, although it was acceptable. Now this is with a tree shade area, and this is the 13 megapixel, and you could see pretty good detail as this is the sun shining on it. But when I turned on that HDR, it did brighten up the scene quite a bit here, and I left HDR on for the 16 by 9 aspect ratio, and you can see I'm very happy with this picture, and it turned out very well. Let me know what you guys think down below. Now on this picture right here, this was the regular 16 by 9 no HDR, but when I turned the HDR on for this one, you could see it really got better here, and I was very happy with the results of this. So I do think Motorola's high dynamic range does turn out pretty well here, and it looked even better when I did high dynamic range here for the highest resolution here on 4x3. Now on these flowers are actually moving, so I do have to applaud Motorola for catching this picture right here in 13 megapixels while the flower was moving. But when I turned on HDR, once again, you could see it did turn out pretty well here, so I was happy with that. Switching over to the wide, you could see how the flower was moving there. There was a little bit of loss of detail, but overall, I mean, it's still an acceptable picture, and I was pretty happy with that shot. Now, this was a little bit of shade here, and this is the 16 by 9, the widescreen. And it turned out decent, but when I turned on HDR, I see more detail in the lion's head there from this picture. So overall, not too shabby. Now on the 4x3, it did go down in terms of vibrancy, but this is when I turned off HDR, and this is just a standard shot. You might want to edit that one. Now on the stop sign, you could see I didn't have HDR on here, and you can't even see the sky. There was actually a blue sky, but when I turned on HDR, you could see the blue sky did appear, and that did fix a lot of things there. It says never stop, and you should probably stop there, but that's totally up to you if you don't want to stop. But you could see on the 16 by 9, it was pretty decent. Now the panorama shot did impress me very much, and it was very fun to use this because it was just very intuitive and easy to use the panoramic shot. Now right here, you could see there's pretty good detail in this shot, and now let's get into the zooming here. So I'm going to start out right here with the all the way back, and then I'm gonna go into like 2x zoom right after this, and you could see it didn't really zoom too much there, so that might have been like 1.5x. But let's go into the 2x zoom here, and you can see we did zoom in about 2x here. Now this only zooms in 4x because this is not a high-end flagship. This can zoom in 8x, and you can see now we are at 4x here, which is the maximum zoom length for this Moto G4. Now this mural right here, this is shot in 13 megapixels. You can see plenty of detail and color rich there. Now when I put it in 16 megapixel, I did lose a little bit of color vibrancy, but I could still accept this picture and it's still definitely shareable. But I turned on HDR and once again it blew up the scene and it looks pretty decent there in my opinion. Let me know what you guys think. Now for all you selfie people out there, I took a couple of selfies and this one was with the portrait mode, and you can see there's plenty of detail with the 5 megapixel, very acceptable. And this one I turned on the HDR on the front side and you can see it did blow out the lighting behind me pretty decently. Now this isn't decent lighting. This is about I'm gonna say about noon right here, so I thought you could see my eyeballs pretty easily there. Now this one right here, it was like maybe 5 o'clock here, so sun was going down, but it still looks pretty decent. Now for that retina flash, you could see I was in a pitch black area. I turned on that retina flash, or that's Apple's term, but you know, that flash on the front, and you could see there. But this was an indoor selfie and it was dark in there, but you could see it, you know, it didn't do too well right there, but still acceptable. Now indoors here, you could see I turned on the flash and took a shot of this macro, and you can see it did bring in that scene. Now this was about 3 o'clock in the morning, or 4 o'clock, the sun was coming up, and I did a little panoramic of the clouds and I was pretty pleased. On these macros here, you could see the Canon, you know, pretty easily. You can make out all the details. So macros are pretty decent if you have decent lighting. This was just regular lights from my, you know, studio spot. So you could see right there the tripod, pretty decent, and there's the 13 megapixels on the tripod. Now we're gonna take one more look at the Canon in the 13 megapixels. So you can see, look at even more detail. You could even see the dust on the camera there if you look closely under the Canon sign there. Now this was just a picture of that same shot earlier from that selfie, and this is the last one until we get into the full video sample. So let's get into the video samples.
This is the rear recording on the Moto G4. I think this is optically stabilized. It seems pretty smooth. As you can see, I'm panning here. The shot tends to stay very smooth, and what's nice about this camera is that there is an audio mic from the front of this device, which makes it very easy to capture audio straight from the Moto G4 itself. So let me get closer in on something right here to kind of get a little look at the quality. You can see the fire hydrant right there. But basically, overall, it's not really that bad overall. But let me know your thoughts on the rear recording. Now let's flip it over to the front recording on the Moto G4. So this is the front-facing recording quality on the Moto G4. As you can see, let's kind of pan it just a little bit to see the level of smoothness you're going to get on the camera here. So not bad from my, you know, what I'm seeing right here on the viewfinder. But let me know what you guys think about it. Now this is 30 FPS, and this is rocking out at, I believe it's 1080p. If I'm wrong, I will leave that down below. But this is the front-facing recording. We did this earlier in the intro, but we just did this to get another look at it. If we pan up, you can see looks pretty green up there, and not too shabby nonetheless. So now let's get into the next shot. This is the recording of the Moto G4 in more of a really darkly lit situation. So you can see it does lose quite a bit of quality, and there is no front-facing flash. So if you are going to be doing video from the front of the device, you want to make sure that you're in some decent lighting, because low lighting is not going to be the best. Although there is kind of a retina style of flash like they do on the iPhone for the front-facing camera, and we're going to show that in a second here. Rear recording on the Moto G4. You can see it is about 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning here, and I do have the door open just a little bit so you can see the level of quality you're going to get in low light scene here. But you can see we do lose quite a bit of detail until we get back in lighting. But if we do put the flash on, let me put the torch on, you can see it does pick up quite a bit of detail here. So if you do put the torch on, you will get nice detail, although not the greatest as you would in daylight, but that is to be expected. But you can see I'm zooming here in on the bike here, and we're trying to pick up as much detail as possible. But that's basically what you're going to expect from the rear recording. You just want to make sure that you turn this torch on if it is a really darkly lit environment.
So what you're taking a look at here is the zoom function on the Moto G4, and you can see it was a little bit choppy on the zoom, but I can still make out that there's a helicopter there or something flying in the sky. And now we're taking just a quick look at the buildings and somebody's head that just went past me, which you can see a little bit choppy when zooming, but overall, I mean, it's still gonna work in a pinch.
Pretty much wraps this camera review up on the Moto G4. If you guys enjoyed it, please go ahead, click the like button for me, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Follow me on my social feeds, they'll be down below in the comment section, just in case you don't like watching every video, you prefer a different platform such as Facebook or Instagram. I got those too. And let me know what you guys think about the Moto G4 camera and if you would like anything different or change. And I will catch you all in the next video. Be well and peace.